In the tunnel.
In the tunnel.
In the tunnel. You're listening to In the Tunnel.
Hello and welcome to In the Tunnel, episode number 109. Yeah, so today we're gonna take a look at some of the playoff stuff that's been going on. So I think we're just gonna kick it off by starting directly with the NBA.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best place to start. Um, Partially because of the lunacy that kind of is surrounding the one series that's left, being the Heat and the Celtics. Which I look, I haven't gambled long enough to understand how frequent this is. But the betting landscape versus the reality of what basketball is just completely night and day in this. So we have the Miami Heat who have they're the 8 seed. They had to go through the play-in, which is its own stupid thing to survive and make it into the playoffs.
Yep.
Took down the number 1 seed Bucks, then took down the Knicks, and now their reward is to play the Celtics, who were a 57 win team over the season. But once they've gotten to the playoffs, I think they gave up 2 games in a series to the Hawks, which the Hawks
Yeah,
were not a great team.
correct.
Um, they gave up, I think, yeah, they gave up games to the Sixers because they needed to come back from down 3-2 to win that series. Um, and at this point, they were down 3-0 to the Heat and now are down 3-2. But the interesting part of this is the NBA is unique in that a 3-0 reverse sweep, or I guess a 4-win reverse sweep, has never happened before. There have been instances where teams have gotten back into it to game 7, but they've
But never
lost.
won.
Um,
Yeah.
Correct. Um, and to be in the hole when you're the favorite and you have home court advantage also doesn't bode well because I guess you want that ultimate home court advantage in a potential game 7, but I think if there's anything that can be learned is that the Miami Heat are just always the same. They have the same play style,
Yep.
and it's kind of like the New England Patriots with Tom Brady. Is like they played the exact same way for 20 years and it just worked. And the Miami Heat, regardless of who plays for them, regardless of their record, if they make the playoffs, I think this is a learning lesson for any true basketball fan that you can't think that they're going to get swept or that any series is going to be easy.
I
It's a little
mean, also
surprising to
like
see.
yeah, like again, the Celtics have been the favorite basically the whole time, even when they were down 3-0 to win games.
Yeah. And let me also just take a second to say on the West Coast or Western Conference side that the Nuggets uh came out of their conference, beat the Lakers. Uh I think that was a clean sweep,
Yep.
and I don't know. I think that one was a little bit less surprising just because yeah, the Lakers are kind of finding their stride a little bit better after the trade deadline, but I don't think that I looked at them as a true threat to anybody. Like I thought it was a magical run for their fan base in their eyes, but and realistically, there was only a certain amount of time before that was going to fail. There
Yeah.
were just stronger teams with just as much star power.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying it was going to be Phoenix that took them out. I thought it could have been the Nuggets. I think the Clippers potentially could have taken them out if they matched up with them. Um, I just think that there were a number of teams that were in a position to
Fair.
I don't know. But I will say, I hate LeBron's antics drastically, but I will say that what the Lakers did this year was kind of the right thing to do, and that they just got rid of Westbrook and they traded for bench depth because they didn't really have any.
Yeah.
And bench depth has proven in the playoffs this year to be the ultimate X factor.
Yeah.
Um,
I would agree.
and the Nuggets have it, for sure. But getting back to the Eastern Conference, um, I don't know. Like if the Celtics were down 3-0 in the series, the foregone conclusion should be the Heat are going to win the series, not if not how, but when. Um, because at this point they ran through three teams. I think they took out the Bucks in 5 games. So like
Yeah.
I don't think there's any intimidation factor at this point.
No.
But yeah, you want to go into the next graphic here.
Yeah.
So I checked DraftKings today because unfortunately I didn't think to screenshot it in the moment. But like I said, the big thing about this is the amount of people and the amount of data that I guess suggests that the Celtics are going to be the first team to reverse sweep. And
Yeah.
it doesn't make any sense to me because throughout this whole postseason, if there's one thing that's been true, is that the Celtics have been very inconsistent, especially with their star power.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Whether it's been Jason Tatum, like, has 2 or 3 quarter spurts of just not shooting, if it's Jalen Brown averaging, or not averaging, but contributing like 12 to 13 points less than his average, uh,
Yep.
they've made it really hard on themselves to win. And I mean, it's no different than the rest of the NBA when I say teams either win in via blowout or they lose via blowout. But I guess right now we're in a situation where, like I said, I should have gotten the odds earlier. But the belief was after game 5, when the Celtics were down 3-1 still, that they were the betting favorite to win the series.
Which would have been the first, which will or would be the first team to reverse sweep in NBA
Right.
playoffs.
And it's like, that's absolutely crazy. And part of me thinks like anybody in their right mind should have put money on the Heat to win the series at that point.
Hmm.
Because like uh, the data says that's a loss you can live with if it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's been, I think it's 150 times,
Yeah. Fair.
that team's gone up 3-0 because they used to do 5 game series in the
Yeah.
90s. So to go from up 3-0 to lose 4-3, I think you can put a fair amount of confidence in
Mm-hmm.
that. And the Celtics were what does the graphic say? Over -500 to win the series
Yeah. Minus 500 to win
before
the
it started.
series. Yep.
And at this point, they're plus 125, what was it,
115.
to win the series. And yet, if you were to pick a champion of the 3 teams that are live, the team that's up 3-2 and at one point was up 3-0 in their series is a 300 point underdog to the Celtics.
Hey,
Like
what
the
are you gonna
Nuggets,
do?
yes, are the favorite. I'm not really sure why, because I don't know, like the Nuggets weren't the favorite the past 2 years despite having good records and having basically the same team. but for this year, I don't understand how you can have the Celtics boosted this much. I don't understand how the Heat have been pretty dominant on their home floor this whole postseason, and how going into tonight, the Celtics are 3-point favorites in Miami. Like, there's a fair amount of I don't understand involved in this, and I'm not really sure where to go with it.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is just like unsuccessful comebacks, right? So like 3-0 deficits in pretty late rounds, right?
Mhm.
And again, there's been no 0-3 comeback so far.
Alright. The instances where there has been a relative comeback have been pushed to game 7. Most of the time, it's been the lower seed that has come back, but they're the visiting team in game 7,
Yeah.
and that's where they've lost.
Hmm.
Um, the I guess one of the advantages for the Celtics in this respect is they're the favorite, and should they come back, game 7, unlike these other instances, is not a visiting game for them.
Hmm.
But, like, can you really trust that?
Yeah, there'll be a home team on a game 7. So that's
Mhm.
one thing going for them if they do make it to. Yeah. All right. So the other playoffs. Let's look at the NHL. So the NHL is in a similar state, right? We have one team that's known, one team that's not, but we all are pretty sure. Uh, what do you think? How do you think the playoffs have come as a fan outside of any playoff team?
I think it's very interesting because, look, with me being a Penguins fan, we were battling the Islanders and the Panthers for that last spot that the Panthers ended up occupying. And
Yes.
I was very adamant about if it was the Penguins in that last spot, Boston would have dismantled them in a sweep
Yes.
because they
I
were
would
not
I
playing well.
I would
They
agree.
never found the recipe. But if there's, and I think that, like, the Panthers were the only team in the NHL that had a winning record against Boston this
It
year.
was like
But
even
I
or
think
winning. Yeah.
once you got to the playoffs, you had every right to throw that out
Yeah.
because, like, the Boston had been on such a record pace that in the regular season they could afford to lose.
Mhm.
Um, but the weird thing is, it wasn't that it was easy for the Panthers, but it was that the Panthers against Boston always kind of looked like they were in control.
Yeah.
Um, and so we know the science backs it up, and I've said it a number of times. Hockey compared to a sport like basketball is way more contingent on luck versus skill. Whereas basketball is the sport that's most contingent on skill. Skill gets you everywhere. In hockey, it really is about,
A puck bouncing.
yeah, bounces and, miscues.
I mean, it's not to
So
say that
that's why,
skill doesn't get you places.
oh no, absolutely. But because of how playoff hockey works, it's a
Mhm.
completely different game.
Yeah.
And that game is centered on defense taking over. And it basically comes down to, in a lot of series, who makes the mistake and not who makes the highlight play. Now, there have been instances with the Florida Panthers where the highlight play has won them a game,
Yeah.
like it did against Carolina with Kachuk scoring with 5 seconds left.
Yeah.
But I think it's become less surprising as it's gone on that the Panthers were kind of just settling in. Plus, don't forget they were supposed to be a good team this year. They just kind of
They
the big
flopped pretty
trade
hard
they
at the
made with
beginning.
Huberto
Yeah.
kind of like fucked up the chemistry.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's more surprising that, and actually, now that I think about it, kind of isn't. Teams with low offensive firepower are you'd think are in the best shape to win cups, but the recipe over the like past 5 to 7 years, maybe longer, has kind of shown that you're like a lock to get to the second round, but after that, you're kind of like
Yeah.
risking it. So he's like,
I don't know. I
I
mean, you could just be unlucky and become the Maple Leaves and Lightning series that this year's first round was.
yeah, that's true. And look, the Panthers had the advantage of they played against teams with their back against the wall
Hmm.
for reasons that had nothing to do with the Panthers. The Toronto Maple Leafs will always have the back against the wall of they have all this offense, they have all these stars, and they haven't gotten far. So they will always have that pressure of what can you do because it's a failure unless you go far. The Boston Bruins had the pressure of it's the best season in NHL history, and if they don't win the cup, then it's considered a failure. So none of these things
I
are
mean, I
contingent
wouldn't
on the
say that if
Panthers.
they didn't win the cup, it's a failure. I'm saying that they
Well, it was
should
their
have
last
made it to the
realistic
ECF.
chance. It was their last realistic chance at
Yeah,
the cup because of Bergeron,
yeah.
because of Marchand,
But I
because their
definitely do
core is
think
just that old.
getting out of the first round, not getting out of the first round is a failure. But I don't
Oh
think
yeah,
that winning
absolutely.
the cup, not winning the cup, is a failure. If they got to the ECF, I would have been like, yeah, they made a pretty good season. Because
Yes,
at
but
some point, like I'm thinking by the Eastern Conference Finals, like the record goes out the window. It's just who can play a better seven.
it's true. But I think let me backtrack a little bit and say that the expectation was still a pretty deep run.
Yeah,
Um,
I will
puck
say that
puck
too.
luck is always going to exist, but and you had a good point with that. But I think at the same time, like
The
the
puck luck should not have puck luck should not and did not uh impact that series to make the Panthers win.
right
Like the full
and
series.
right, and I think what's most surprising is kind of the Panthers are getting stronger as it goes on because they
Yes.
had Boston in seven,
Yeah.
but I think the Maple Leafs they had in what five,
5.
and then they had the Hurricanes in four.
Yeah.
Like for the last seed, because we only have in this current format, or I guess the 16 team format, the Nashville Predators to look at as the other 16, quote, 16 seed,
Mhm.
bottom seed to go this far.
Yeah.
And they basically were just kings of game seven
Mhm.
every round.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So this is a completely different look. And
Yeah.
it's one that I think is hard to stop. The only thing is like, now let's flip to the Hurricanes though.
Mm.
And
Another ECF.
we'll get to them in a second. But let's touch on the West. So
I mean, this series that's currently going on was,
mhm,
for all intents and purposes, supposed to be a sweep.
yeah, but Dallas always strikes me as a team that they've always put together a roster that's good enough to make the second round.
Hmm.
They've done a good job of showing their investment while not necessarily risking the farm to be good because they
Yeah.
have solid up and coming talent that as like Robertson and Hintz.
Yeah.
Um,
Definitely.
but at the same time, Vegas just kind of like quietly does their thing. And we
With
were
3 goalies that
yeah.
are like you wouldn't recognize them from three years ago in the league, basically.
Yeah, we talked last night in our pre-show about they acquired Jonathan Quick and basically have not played him at all.
I don't think you
They
should.
have instead leaned on guys who um have been like okay, we found out that Aiden Hill, I think, uh was pretty much proven but for very bad teams. Um
Yeah, he
And
did.
so
He had
kind
a
of
really
flies
good
under the
stint on the
radar.
Sharks.
Yeah, and had four pretty much low backup stats seasons on the Coyotes,
Yeah.
which we had a good laugh about. If there were any two teams that you could basically cross off and not give a shit about for the past 5 years, it was basically anywhere that Aiden Hall or Hill was playing was those two teams. Um, but they're the Western Conference is interesting because it's the exact 180 of the style that's going on in the East.
Yeah,
You have
definitely.
Vegas pouring in goals against Dallas, whereas it was Florida in a dogfight against Carolina.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, again,
so
on the East, right? In order to get your like offensive powerhouses, it was literally the first round matchup between the Lightning and the
Mhm.
Maple Leafs.
Yeah,
No other team, aside from you can argue the Bruins, were as offensively talented or relied on their offense as much. And even then, the Bruins relied on their goaltending a good deal.
I think
Um,
that's fair.
so I do think once, well, obviously, right, one of those two teams between the Lightning and the Maple Leafs had to lose the first round, and
Right, which I
so
think that in itself was advantageous for whoever played in the second round.
correct. So I do think that just the teams that got into the playoffs, you were already gearing to see such different styles of play between the West and the East.
Yeah. And I think to an extent every year it's kind of different west and the east.
But I mean,
Also
like, if you
depends
look
on
at the
where
West,
Marc-Andre
right?
Fleury is playing.
If you look at the West, right, you had Vegas, you had Edmonton, you even had Colorado, who's supposed to be pretty offensively talented. You have Dallas, who's showing up with goals. What team isn't trying to score? Maybe the Jets, but like they were what 7 or 8.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, the Jets being in the playoffs in itself was kind of an afterthought.
Yeah, exactly. Like you had 4 or 5 teams, basically just offensive powerhouses. You couldn't lose all of them in the first round.
Hmm.
So yeah, I do think that just the teams that made it and who they were playing against really defined the styles that you were going to see in each side being so drastically different.
So let's go through the three teams that are left between Florida, Vegas, and Dallas. And I think you're saying it's a foregone conclusion that it's going to be Vegas
I
versus Florida,
really think Vegas should have closed it out in 4. And I still do think they should win the series.
which for a brief time we did have an opportunity to say that in both the NBA and NHL, the conference finals were both sweeps, but then Miami Heat lost one and then
Vegas.
Vegas lost one.
Yep.
But like there was a real chance there because everybody was up 3-0,
Yeah.
which was absolutely
It's
crazy.
absolutely
That
ridiculous.
that in itself, like I know that we say that there's not a lot of parity at that point in the playoffs, but that's kind of parody in itself
Yeah.
just to come across that outcome more than once. But
Yep.
between let's go with your hunch that it's going to be Vegas. So, what are the thoughts for the actual final?
I okay, so if I let's not even think it's going to be Vegas, right? I don't care which team from the West wins. I would pick Florida.
That's kind of where I'm at too. And I'm actually surprised to hear you say that. I would have thought that you kind of would have maybe leaned a little bit more towards a balance or maybe Vegas, but I
I
don't
mean,
know.
I think so. My opinion on Vegas right now is the fact that they have 3. I mean, their goaltenders are okay, but there's not really one giving like a amazing showing is a fluke in any other playoff year.
Right. And as you said last night, in our meeting, decent goaltending really historically doesn't get you very far.
Exactly.
in the playoffs. And what'll be interesting to find out is how Florida is going to play because of the style in the West.
Hmm.
Because they had the benefit of in the East, they basically played, with the exception of Toronto, they played two of the three teams that were most defensively game planning.
Yeah, but
Um,
at the same time, right? Like Toronto, they faced a lot of shots. I really do think Boston also some games they faced a lot of shots. Like I, I think that they can handle. Like I think the defense can handle it.
right. I think that they can handle it. I think it's just going to be an adjustment
Yeah,
because yes,
definitely.
Toronto does it, but like I said
But
earlier,
also,
the playoffs are a different animal based on defense. And at what point, if you walk into that highly scoring threat that is Vegas right now, do you have to throw out defense and are you capable of winning while throwing out defense?
but also at the same time, like I don't think, regardless of who wins the West, I don't think the game plan that Florida takes is drastically different. So I really do think they could basically be planning on like starting to figure out how they want to play at least the opener of the Stanley Cup Finals,
And
regardless of the team.
do you think that there's any disadvantage to the fact that I know that it's only a handful of days, but the fact that Florida finished up their series so early, and then the fact that Dallas stayed alive and basically bought themselves an extra 2 or 3 days, that time off means anything?
No, I think like I understand that people think playoff like, days off are a problem, but I really do think that there are ways to use that time effectively. Especially like your opponent is one of two teams. Get the similarities of those teams and start prepping it. Like you you have extra time. That doesn't mean people are off the ice. That doesn't mean you stop looking at things. You use the time where and can prepare because the other two teams can't
Mhm.
effectively. Use the time effectively. Like that is the problem, right? And I really hope they do because they have that time. Basically, getting a sweep gives them extra time. It should be like an incentive.
Makes sense. The only thing that I have on that is I think that they're with sports now, because as fans, we see it as anytime there's an off day, there is a reason to believe that these athletes have their head in film or whatever it may be. But A, that's just not how athletes are anymore.
No.
And B, collective bargaining agreements also kind of have given more balance to life as well as the work in the
Right.
sense of
But
the
I'm not
sport.
saying like, go for like a full on practice, right? But, you know, take a morning skate,
Yeah.
spend maybe like 2 hours looking at like film or something.
Yeah, I think it all depends on what they're allowed to do,
Yeah.
because I think that there's, much like the NFL, where you we're in a scenario where in the NFL, regardless of what you do Sunday, regardless of if you shit the bed or not, you basically are guaranteed to not have to practice Monday because of the collective bargaining agreement.
Correct.
And what I'm interested in knowing is, say there isn't a big turnaround time, or
Mm-hmm.
say you have a 2-day turnaround time, of that 2-day turnaround, what actually is going on? Because I think there's only so many adjustments that a non-coaching staff member can make
Yeah,
in that time period.
I agree.
And I think, you know, uh, Florida has the benefit of game planning that now, but they may not have the benefit of adapting as needed later.
Yeah. I mean, you could also make the argument that people will have to get their legs back under them because they wouldn't have been practicing as intensely or whatnot, or didn't have game intensity around them. So yeah, that makes sense. But I'm just hoping that they use their time to do what they can do in order to prepare, because at the end of the day, all these players do want to win. So they should be doing what they are allowed to, at least, in order to prepare for winning.
In theory, yes. But like, look, we live in an era where we don't know any professional athlete that smokes cigarettes, but I guarantee you they're there.
Yeah.
Um, like we don't know who's passionate about their craft and who isn't. And I was listening the other day to a podcast where they were saying, in basketball, any guy who's 7 foot grew up being told by everybody around them that they should play basketball because of their height.
Yeah.
And, there may be somebody who's just really good at skating that doesn't actually give a shit about hockey.
Yeah.
And, so there's a number of different factors, and maybe I'm dying on a hill that, or maybe even caring about something that is not really the point here, but I think that there's just so many different factors that go into it in preparedness that I don't know. I think that coaching staff adjustments at the end of the day are always going to be the biggest thing because coaches who
Yeah.
fail to adapt
But also,
are
like,
always the
these
scapegoat.
rest days are a haven too, because, like, again, there's no game day pressure. They're guaranteed Stanley Cup, so they can, like, take some time to not, be at that intensity and have a realistic outlook at to what your next series will be. Like, just
Yeah, I guess it's just for me, it's a long-winded way of saying that once your body and your mind are used to the intensity, the longer that you go without it, because you can only replicate it so much in non-contact,
hmm.
kind of practices, that once that intensity picks back up again, if you're not ready for it, it can hit you hard.
Yeah, but that's all you. There's not like we can sit here debating that all day, but you're not going to know how it's going to affect them until it happens.
True. I just think that there's something to the team that wins a game 7 and has a 3-day turnaround to
I
the next
mean,
series is
I I
probably the better bet for game 1 of the next
I
series.
don't know because, like, it's also, it depends on how tough that game 7 is. It depends on a lot of factors, right? Like, you
Well,
they
in
can just be
hockey,
too
I think
tired. Like, they could just not have
true,
recovered enough, right? Like, there's so many other factors.
true, but in hockey, we also know that game 7 is the ultimate defensive grind.
Yeah.
Like it's a different level
Yeah, no,
of
I agree.
and
But yeah.
yeah,
Anyway,
all right.
let's
So, yeah, where do we go from here for Carolina? Because they became a feel good story in I want to say 2018, 2019, or whatever the year the storm surge was, uh the celebration. It was either 18, 19, or 20. I think I want
I
to
think
say
it's
it was
18,
19.
19.
Okay. So let's occupy this conversation under that assumption. They have gone through a defensive first style for these past few years, and rightfully so, because I think at the time their core was like uh Slavin and some of these other young guys that were mainly defensemen.
Yep,
And then they added Svechnikov and some other pieces later on. But
correct.
as they added offense, they didn't really change the game style. And the one glaring thing that they really have been passionate about is they'll upgrade anywhere except for between the pipes because
Yeah.
they said do with James Reimer and then they said do with Freddie Anderson and look, Freddie Anderson at a time because of where he was in Toronto was deemed to be a good goaltender because the offense around him basically put
Now,
him in position to get wins.
but I mean, also, I like we spend so much time talking, right? Like, decent goaltending doesn't win you a cup, but I will also put it on the other side and say, like, star
Decent goal
goaltending
scoring
also doesn't win you a cup.
doesn't do yeah. right. It's a marginal difference. Now that being said, in James Reimer and Freddie Anderson, you do have enough evidence from prior playoff series to understand that the regular season's a different animal for them. And
Yes.
it's not Marc-Andre Fleury bad where it's like, 20% difference, but it's enough of a difference to lose some games where it's
Yeah.
basically like these guys are top 15 goaltenders in the regular season. Well, not James Reimer. Let me make something very clear. Definitely not James Reimer. Because any goaltender that flopped in Detroit should not be playing in the NHL past that, and yet James Reimer did. And but Frederick Anderson was a very respectable goaltender. But one of his reasons why he's not still in Toronto is because in the
There's a
playoffs he was a
multitude
shell of
of
himself.
reasons why he's not still
Right.
in
Well,
Toronto.
money too. But yeah, like like Frederick Anderson has collapsed just as many series as any other goaltender that was supposed to win the big ones for a highly prolific team. But uh, I think we're at a point now where we have to say you got to upgrade somewhere if you're the Hurricanes, or you have to tear it down
Yes.
because regular season doesn't mean anything anymore. I
Hmm.
understand North Carolina is a smaller market for hockey and that having playoff
Okay,
team
I will
hockey
say
is good in
the
itself, good for the game. Good.
I will say that whatever they're doing, sorry, there was a bunch of noise in my background. But I will say whatever they're doing is drawing fans though.
Well, they're on NC State's campus. They should be drawing fans.
No, like it's sold out every game. Like I'm not
It
like cuz
should be. They're on a
no, but
college
if
campus.
you look, right? That does not like even if you're on a college campus, does that mean you'll get close to sellout on a freaking Tuesday night?
Well, you should when you literally can
Let's
walk to
look
the
at
football
Arizona and then
facility.
tell me the same thing.
What?
Look at Arizona and tell me the same thing.
Arizona is selling out. Arizona is selling out in that Arizona State arena. The difference is the Hurricanes play in an arena that is slightly smaller than the normal NBA arena. Like it's a small basketball sized arena. It can probably hold uh and let's look it up. What's the seating capacity for PNC Arena? So let's see what it brings back. What's the point of series when this is okay? There's 18,000 seats.
Yeah, selling
For,
that 18,000 on a Tuesday is something.
okay, but we're saying, well, look at Arizona. They have three more than 1/3 of the seats available, like less available.
Yeah,
Like we're talking about Arizona has 5,000 for a sellout.
yeah,
Yeah, they couldn't sell out when they were in Phoenix, whatever. Like we kind of knew that that was happening, and we at this point know that the deal's fallen through, and the Coyotes are pretty much a lock to be somewhere else, which we
yep,
probably should have put in this episode, but didn't. Um, but that being said, like the football practice facility is the bigger building in that parking lot.
yeah.
Like having
But I
gone
mean,
to a Penguins game there, like
it's a thing. Like
college
the
students should be
point is
selling
that
that out.
okay, but hold on. The point is whatever they're doing, as long as they maintain their 99%, they basically had a 99% attendance average the entire season.
Yes, makes sense.
No, like you look at other teams in other areas like Columbus, you look at New Jersey, New Jersey didn't even get close. You look at
Yeah,
even
well, that's Newark. Like
but
we're both from New Jersey. We know that Newark isn't a place you go to at night.
even New York, the Islanders at least didn't like they Carolina still beat them. in attendance percentage.
Okay, I mean, yeah, but you would think that the Islanders stadium being as new as it is should draw more than that. Like not
So
99% much, but like the fact that they're basically on the LIRR or not LIRR, but they're on a train stop
yeah.
to walk to the arena. Like there's no real excuse at that point. Um,
So, but the point is that like that shows a lot. Like regardless of like TV or whatever, right? They're still getting their fans to show up to basically every game. And yes, you can make the argument they're on a freaking college campus, but whatever. We have teams playing
oh,
in 10,000 person arenas, okay? Like let's be honest.
okay, so let's take a look at the attendance before this year. So,
It was pretty high.
well, they're on a 2,000 seat upgrade this year in terms of attendance. Before that, they crossed out 2020, 21, obviously.
Yeah.
In 2018-19, they had 14,000.
Yeah.
And
So but I
then,
mean, you can't say that whatever they're doing is drawing more fans. You you literally can't, like, whatever they're doing is working for them. Now, do I agree with you that they do have to make more changes, but
well, it's not the storm surge that's driving them to, like, when they had the storm surge year, that probably was the number one reason. People wanted to see what the show was going to be on the ice after.
yeah.
But
But
now it's like,
now
yeah,
it's a
it's winning
good
hockey.
hockey team.
Okay. Now, let's also just fill in the cracks here and say they averaged in between 2014 through 2019, they still averaged, I mean, it's drastically different. It basically goes anywhere between
Yeah, I would
12,000
say the lowest.
to 15,500.
Makes sense.
So, I mean, it's probably not the lowest in the NHL, but
So, I
like
mean, like,
that's also not anywhere near what the Florida Panthers do in October.
right, but my point is that, like, yes, so for the, like, they hit the Eastern Conference Finals again, right? Like, whatever. But at the same time, this hockey team is a business, right? So whatever they're doing, not improving their team, they are getting fans to show up in the seats with the team they currently have. So what is next for them is a question in itself because, like, okay, well, how do they ideally want to keep the fans drawn? And for us hockey fans, it's improve your team. And what's the place that we know that they can improve their team? It's James Reimer, right?
And it probably also is somewhat on offense. I hate to say Jordan Stahl's been good in Carolina for a long time in terms of being a leader, but he never has matched any of the point production that he ever was climbing towards in Pittsburgh.
Yes.
And for whatever reason, I'm not saying I'm rooting against him, but the fact that he's still on the Hurricanes at this point in his career probably indicates that there's a bit of, what are we doing here? Like that probably, and let's take a look at the lines because like I'm curious to where he actually fits. Okay, so he's a third line center.
That's where I
Um,
would put him, probably.
okay, and they do have Paul Stastny. Um, they have Tivo Teravainen, and then I we're looking at. I mean, I don't know hockey as well as you do, but other than Sebastian Aho this year because of Svechnikov's injury, like you don't have a ton of goal scorers here. I'm not saying that a
Oh,
team needs to have a Crosby, Gensel, Rust line or
yeah.
like one of the Boston top six lines to be successful. But what I am saying is when I look at Stefan Nozhin, Sebastian Aho, and Seth Jarvis line, I don't really expect production outside of Aho. When I
Yeah.
look at Teravainen, Drury, and Kakaniemi line. I don't expect a lot of production aside from Teravainen.
I mean,
Um,
ideally, you should include that you should expect some production from Kakaniemi,
yes,
but I
but
do agree with you.
he's kind of flopped in his career to an extent.
Yes, no, but
In
I'm
terms
saying
of
is
what he was
like
supposed
he is the player that you would hopefully expect the other more production to come from. I'm not saying he did or will.
Mackenzie Macarin, Jordan Stahl, and Martin Neckis on a
Yeah,
line.
but just the
That
third
doesn't
line,
spell
man.
scoring at all. Okay, but
Third and fourth lines, like I expect most of your scoring to be out of your first two lines, and
okay, well then
in
why
order
isn't
to
Paul
win a
Stastny on
game,
the third line and just double down on the third line instead of the fourth line? Is Paul Stastny not good enough to score at this point in his career?
no, but what I'm saying is most of your production, I, in the way that hockey works, most of your production is coming out of your top two lines. Now, the way you win games is by having your third or fourth line contribute a goal here or there. But is it
Absolutely.
saying that your scoring is coming from them? Then, unless your first two lines are overperforming, I think your line structure is ridiculously wrong.
And look, I'll say this. Brent Burns probably played just as well as he has most of the year versus any other year in his career, despite the fact he's in his mid late 30s. But their defensive pairings also include Jacob Slavin, Brady Shea, and Shane Gossip pair, which is pretty deep for defensive pairings.
Yeah.
Only you had the power in the offense like you do the power in the defense.
But you
I
gotta say
understand if
that.
it's the game plan style. I just don't understand
I
why
mean,
you
I
wouldn't
think
supplement.
they played their style very well, and they were a more defensively oriented team, even on like their forwards.
Okay, but how is it any different than what the Islanders did with Barry Trotz?
The Islanders, I'm pretty sure the island like average age of somebody on the Islanders was like 35,
Okay.
and that's a
So
major
what we're
difference.
saying then is it's just as not acceptable because Carolina's guys are younger and should have the wheels to be able to do it.
No, what I'm saying is I think defensive style play is fine, but I think that the
I'm not
Islanders
talking about the
failed.
defense.
Hmm?
I'm not talking the defensive style. What I'm saying is if the Islanders and the Hurricanes play pretty much the same style, and the Islanders got to the conference finals before they lost under Barry Trotz at one point in the past 5 years, and Rob Brindamore decides, okay, we're going to play pretty much the same style, and they're going to get to the Eastern Conference Finals before they lose, and then they're not going to get back. Then at what point, because
But
Barry Trotz got fired from the Islanders, at what point do you have to make a change?
the point is that like I don't think so, but you're still implying the style is wrong, and I don't
No,
think.
I'm implying that the style needs to be complemented more. You need to supplement your weaknesses. And what allowed the Islanders to make their run was not goal scoring. We'll admit that. But what it was is, like, as you said, superb stardom goaltending doesn't mean shit either. But you can't look at what happened with Robin Leonard and now with Sorokin
Yeah,
and say that's the same.
no, I agree, but like the point is that like they can like if they got had better goaltending, not star goaltending, no need for like Shesterkin or like a new Carey Price or whatever, right?
Right.
But yes, I agree. But I don't think you have to fix both of those things. Take your like it's hard enough to get those pieces. So do I think they should fix something? I really think they should focus on getting one of those pieces, but in the offseason, the NHL offseason is still a thing, right? Like it's hard to get pieces you want because you're going to overpay. And
Especially in goaltending.
yeah,
Like
so
there's just
I
so many of it
do
available.
understand why it failed. We know, right? But fixing it isn't really that easy.
So at this point, and I'm gonna ask you genuinely, if you're the Hurricanes, what do you do? Do you double down further, or do you look to make a change that's a little unconventional? Because knowing that the goaltender free agent market has produced kind of mixed bag, because both these we supplement them instead of supplementing somewhere else.
Um, I really think they should try and fix one of the areas, right? Get another offensive talent or get a goaltender. But it's hard, right? Like coming into the offseason, like as a Devils fan, we went into the offseason last year and we're like, let's do something, right? But it's very hard to get what you want and be okay paying that price.
Right, especially through trading for goaltenders. It's a premium haul that
Right. So, do I think they
Carolina's
should do
prospect
something
of haul.
unorthodox? Not
Right.
really, because they risk too much in
You don't know if their farm is deep enough.
correct. But at the same
All their
time, like,
talent's here.
I do think that they should have the capital to make a move for a better goaltender or somebody to help on offense. It's going to be an overpay. The front office is not going to like it, but I do think they should do it. But dealing with both of those things, I don't think that's going to happen.
It's weird because I think, like, looking back for them when they made the trade with Florida to bring in I can't remember his name. He's with the Rangers now. Um he was a winger, admit ironically from Pittsburgh. What's his name? Anyway, when they made the trade for that guy, I wonder how much of the assets they gave up that they would have rather had now because
Oh,
that dude walked.
I don't know, but I still think they have the capital to do it. Right? That's the thing. All right. Anyway, on to let's talk about the Bruins. Right? Where are they?
Well, this one's a little bit harder to answer because of age is the factor on this one.
That team I think is it's gonna look so different next year.
I agree. And I think that I'd be more confident in saying that they should probably tear it down, which is a wild thing to say after they had the historic season that they did.
Mm-hmm.
And they do have Taylor Hall because they basically worked some magic to get him at the trade deadline a few years ago and then just locked him up. But David Krejci came back from Europe and he was been productive, but I think at this point that's probably out the window for
Bergeron is
long term
gone.
sustainable. Um,
Marchand
yeah.
is probably on his way out soon.
Hmm.
So your young guys are gonna have to step it up, right? You still have
Right.
Pasta, McAvoy.
Who was this guy on the Panthers? I swear I'm gonna figure this out.
The Panthers or the Rangers?
Hurricanes. Vincent Trocheck, that's
Uh,
who it was.
Trocheck? Trocheck was on the
When
Hurricane?
yeah,
I thought
he was traded from the Panthers to the Hurricanes, and that was a big deal at the time.
Trocheck. Oh, okay, whatever.
And I wonder when he left. But anyway, getting back to Boston,
Yes.
Omar has was a bright spot, but let's take a look at what his contract is like because I'm willing to bet he doesn't have a long term deal.
No, I don't think
Uh,
either of them
oh,
are
he
pretty
does.
long term.
He has a deal, and he's covered for the next 2 years. I guess the foresight of the Bruins signing him for a 4 year, $20 million deal before 2021-22 really paid off, especially
Yeah, but
considering
that's
they
a
paid
2 years.
$5 million to who they thought was going to be the backup.
Yeah, but that's a lot of money for a backup still.
Correct, but they thought Swayman was going to be the number one this year, right?
Don't remember. I mean, both of them played well, so I have no idea.
Well, Swayman was filming all the commercials, so
Hmm.
like for national. But I think it's asking a lot of Allmark to stay the same as what he
But
had been.
but also like, what is Swayman's contracts looking like?
Let's see if I can find that out. Swayman is okay, he's on a 3-year deal, but as of when he's a free agent, it looks like
Yeah, so he's
he
gonna
was
get
on an
paid.
ELO. He was on an ELO.
ELC.
Yep.
Yeah, he's gonna
Yeah,
get paid.
ELC. Yeah.
So
Um, which which depletes the roster that much more.
yeah,
Um, and so let's take a look at the roster in its entirety here.
with Pasta on your way out, Krejci on your way
Yeah,
out,
he's a free agent.
or
All right, so
no, sorry,
let's
not
take a look
Pasta,
at
but
guys who, because they do have some young guys. Like they, Swayman was 24, Frederick was 24,
yeah,
uh,
but who's
Pavel Zacha's 25,
yeah,
McAvoy's
but Pavel
25.
Zacha, we know what type of player Pavel Zacha
Really,
is.
McAvoy, or I'm sorry, Pasternak's only 26.
Yeah, he's
I
young.
always thought that that dude was like 31.
No,
That's crazy. All right, but anyway, Tyler Bertuzzi's 27. I'm curious on his contract, because that seems like a trade deadline deal.
right, but
Um,
my point is that like, okay, so you had all of the leadership in like Bergeron, Krejci, Marchand, right?
right, which they're 37, 36, and 34
Yeah.
in age.
So, but
And
like
then you have
now
Nick
that
Foligno at
Bergeron
35.
and Krejci are definitely on their way out, and Marchand is probably on his way out soon.
Correct.
Um, where do you get that leadership from? It's up to Pasta and McAvoy to really step it up.
Where do you get the point production from too? Because
Again, you're looking
we're
at the
looking at
two
here
young
is
guys I've mentioned.
67, 58, and 56 points.
Yeah, you're looking at the two young guys I mentioned. You have to if you're a Bruins fan, right? Because you're not getting that production out of Zaka. He did
He
okay,
had
but again, he was
60
on the check
points.
line.
So let's see who's locked up past this year. If
Zaka's
I can even
locked.
find that.
Allmark
Yeah.
is Pasta, I think. McAvoy, I think.
So here's the interesting thing. Marchand is under contract for next year.
Yes, yeah. I think he's
DeBrusk,
not leaving this year. I don't think.
well, but you know who also is Jake DeBrusk is a free agent.
Uh,
Um, they probably, if they're smart, are going to trade Charlie Coyle away at some point because he's on pretty major hit at almost 5.3 a year for the next 3 years.
okay.
He's kind of proven that he's not the player he once was. Um,
No, but so the question I want to ask is, okay, how do they fill the gap of at least Krejci and Bergeron? Right? Let's worry about getting a backup for Olmark because that's what it looks like you're gonna try and do later. Actually, no, you have Swayman is an RFA, but still, you're probably not gonna give him the contract he wants, so it's probably gonna go to arbitration, and you're still gonna pay him too much for a 1 year deal or something.
and what's the NHL salary cap? Because
84.
yeah, 83.4 million.
I think next year it'll go
So
up by 1
they
million.
have, okay, so let's call it 84.5 million. So next year, and keep in mind, on the NHL roster of this year, uh, and this may actually go into one or two AHL players, they have 10 million in cap space,
Mm-hmm.
or 10.5 million in cap space. They have 14 players under contract.
Yep.
That's going to be really hard to pull off.
Yep.
And yeah,
They're looking at some
yeah, I hope
AHLers
that
to
they're,
step up or getting some good deals, which is going to be
and
really
that's going to
hard.
be just as hard
Yep.
because, you know,
But the
when you
point is
trade at
that
the
like
deadline,
you're losing a two pretty big pieces, basically, Krejci and Bergeron, right?
Mhm.
Who's gonna step up in their place? And you're really hoping right now it's Pasta and McAvoy. I don't see any, but I don't see
Understandable.
anybody else on the current roster who could potentially step it up to that level. Would you agree?
Wait. I think that they take a major step back next year, whether they like it or not.
Hmm.
Or maybe not a major step back. I could still see them being top three in their division because it is Boston.
Hmm.
And they haven't really needed to rebuild very firmly in the past 20 years. Um,
I do think that depending on how next year goes and whether Marchand decides to retire or not,
I think that's going to be a huge indicator.
it's going to be a big indicator.
And I think it's also going to come down to if Pasternak wants to stay around for a rebuild because he has a no trade clause, it looks like, but
Yeah.
he's under contract through 2027 at 11.5 million a year. And if you're just going to tear it down at that point, you might as well just get what you can.
Yep. Exactly. All right. On to the MLB as it is currently going on right now.
Yeah, lots going on with Oakland.
We're about what, like 25 games into the season for most teams.
Oh, we're way above that.
Are
Like
we?
50 games in.
Oh, okay.
Well, the Athletics going into today were 10 and 43.
Oh,
So
right. They
there's
are
no
10 and
way.
40. I'm not done.
Um, so yeah, it's a little bit of a mixed bag between current and future here because from what I've learned, the owners of the Athletics had no real desire to ever keep the team in Oakland.
Yeah.
And every time they proposed stadiums, and they kind of knowingly proposed stadiums with knowledge that as soon as there was a hiccup of like who was going to pay for it, they would just like withdraw.
Mm-hmm.
So all the renderings we've seen for great stadiums in Oakland over the past few years were probably all bullshit.
No, they're all fake.
Um,
All fake.
right. It, it was just a hype train thing,
Mm-hmm.
but I think what we've seen now, and I'm curious what we're going to see with the Arizona Coyotes because of what this kind of means in the same landscape at the same time, is that Oakland to Vegas has obviously worked for the Raiders, although uh, Vegas was really kind of more ready to roll out the red carpet for the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's kind of like, well, Vegas will take the MLB team if you want to give it up, but like they don't really need it. Like
Right, but
they've
I
had a
do
fair amount
think,
of success with the Knights
yeah, they also
to
have their
supplement the Raiders.
two. The Chargers are moving there too, right?
No,
Oh, I don't remember.
Chargers
No,
moved
they
to
moved to LA. Yeah. I'm
LA
sorry.
a little bit in the past there.
Yeah, yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
No, but yeah, so they had success with the Golden Knights. They have success with the Raiders. I do think Oakland also has the problem of being like San Francisco and LA are all like
It's in the shadow.
right there, right? There's four teams right there, including them.
Right. Plus let's also say what it is in regards to Oakland. For being right next to another major city in San Francisco, the reputation that Oakland is the dumpier option of
Yeah,
between
just
San
like
Francisco
the
and Oakland.
Raiders.
Right. So like I think it's fair to say that right now San Francisco has that locked down to an extent to where it's like, if I'm a football fan and I really am going to value the organization, the location, stuff like that, and I live in the Bay Area. Why
Right.
wouldn't I just be a 49ers fan? Because they have a stadium that opened up less than 10 years ago. They have great history, just like the Raiders. The
Right.
Golden State Warriors left Oakland and went to San Francisco.
Yeah.
So, like, the Athletics are all that are there now. And they've shown that in this ever-growing sports world of constant renovations for their facilities that they have no interest in doing that. There's
Hmm.
possums in the visiting uh, telecast booths to the point where the Mets actually their broadcasters walked in and smelled possum shit and were told by the athletics like organization like just take another because like this possum lives here and you just can't be in this one. Like that's what hospitality is to the athletics right now is like the possum gets this booth
Right.
and
Anyway, so yeah, they released a rendering for a ballpark in Las Vegas, which would cost like almost $1.5 billion. Do I really think they need a $1.5 billion stadium? No. Do I think they're gonna ever get to even 30,000 people past the first season in a seat? Probably not. Um, but anyway, yeah, they have the lowest attendance so far. Um,
by a whopping 3,000.
almost four, so
That's
like three and a
that,
half.
that's a pretty
At
bad margin to be in last place.
8.9 thousand people per game.
Yeah, I mean it's not good when you can't top 10.
Yeah, it's also like you're right there with Miami and then Kansas City. Miami, we understand they're basically just like whatever. Kansas City, even that's a
Miami is like,
double.
if I'm going to be out in the sun, there's a million other places to be in Miami.
Yeah, exactly.
Kansas City's rebuilding, and
But the
like
Kansas City can still draw double the amount.
in Kansas City is kind of a small stadium.
Yeah. So again, and even Pittsburgh's at like 17, but Pittsburgh, like your fan base is
You
pretty
draw other
loyal.
fans too. Like I went to the game against the Blue Jays, and I did not know that Toronto was like a 5-hour drive
Hmm.
from Pittsburgh. So we draw other fans when the Mets come into town. We're gonna have tons of Mets fans.
Yeah,
Like everybody wants
I
to
made that road trip.
take in the view. Yeah, and you have.
Hmm.
Remember the Brewers game
Yeah. No, I even made that road trip like quite a long time ago when we were.
before it was with me being
Yeah.
here. But I think what's interesting, like, yeah, we have the stat that says the same night that they had 3,000 fans at an Oakland game, there were 11 of 13 AAA minor league games that had surpassed
Yeah.
attendance, which
But I
AAA
mean,
stadiums
like,
basically have less than 10,000 capacity.
we can fill like in New Jersey, we can fill a Somerset's Patriots games without trying to more fans than.
And that stadium is basically in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah,
Like the biggest attraction next to it is like a Bed Bath and
it's a
Beyond.
Chuck E.
Uh,
Cheese like 10 minutes down the road.
but they do have the Costco. They do have the
Yeah,
Costco, and that now is a big thing.
yeah,
Um, how quickly that changed. But getting back to it, I think it's obvious that the athletics owners of an ownership group are making moves to say the money is not ever going to be here, so why would we try for it to be here? And I
right.
think
But I
regardless of what money there is in Vegas, because like when I looked at the renderings and I see the renderings are this ballpark is literally in the shadow of the MGM Grand, like a block away.
yeah,
The first thing I that comes to my head is the MGM Grand can't possibly have that much real estate next to it. Like, there's no way that this stadium is going to finalize itself in the way that the renderings do.
probably.
Like,
There's
they'll
no
fill a
way that
30,000
they will.
arena.
Okay, my counter to this is I just ignore the rendering until I see a better budgeted stadium because I don't think like the owners don't want to pay 1.5 billion dollars. The city definitely don't want to pay 1.5 billion dollars.
Right, but if we're talking about the hypothetical, will they sell 20,000 seats? If they're on the Vegas Strip, I don't see them not
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because like the Vegas Strip is just that good of a location, and
But
as
then
big
like
as
it
gambling is in
devolves from a
Vegas, you
baseball
have to have
game to a
something else.
show.
I'm sorry?
But if they go anywhere close to the Vegas Strip, they are no longer playing baseball. They're having a show on a baseball field.
Right, but because of how big gambling is in Vegas, it
Dude,
becomes a great alternative.
yeah, fair. I mean, I agree, but I still
You
don't think
lose
that this is realistic.
1,200 at the blackjack table, and you say, you know what, I'm just going to take in an athletics game. Like, that's a fair way to get yourself to stop gambling for 3 hours.
Yeah, but then you're probably gambling on the athletics game because they're probably going to lose anyway.
No,
So,
you're not. Have you seen how bad they Anyway,
yeah. Anyway,
um,
like again, growing up, I was really big into the athletics, so it's kind of sad to see them like trying to move. But I understand.
I think that for them, it's probably overdue. They're
Yeah, definitely.
like, I say the possum thing, but like, it's been well known the sewage stuff. It's been well known that they're not really renovating or upgrading anything in that ballpark. And it's been that way for like 10
Yeah,
years now. So, in some ways, if they weren't going to do anything about it, they've probably overstayed their welcome.
yeah, definitely. No,
So,
no, I like again, I it totally makes sense. It's just like I've been like I used to go to
it's
a
a
lot of
little
Oakland
sad.
games as
It's
a kid,
probably
so
right. It's a little sad. It wouldn't be like if the Buffalo Bills like left Buffalo and the fan base was huge and it like ripped them
yeah.
apart.
No, this fan
It's a
base is
little bit
pretty
different.
small, so
It's a little small, and it's probably easier to just be like, you know what, San Francisco was there the whole time.
yep.
Plus, at this point, they're so bad that like I'm sure young fans would just rather be Giants fans anyway.
Fair. Yeah. All right. Well, you got anything to round out the episode with, or we good?
No, no, I think I'm okay. We probably could have touched on the Coyotes thing, with them not getting approved again. I think
Nah.
it sounds like they're all but gone from Arizona.
Yeah, we'll see. But yeah, we can touch on that in the off-season talk. So
Sounds good.
thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.